The Spirit Walker, Book 4 of the Tessa Lamar novels written by Kathryn M. Hearst. Narrated by Holly Adams. Chapter 1. Someone was going to die today. I knew it the same way Grandma felt bad weather coming in her knees. Only my aching and stiffness didn't go away with a hot shower or cold compress. My pain rested square in the center of my chest. Death was nothing new in my world. After all, one of my husbands was a homicide detective, and I worked alongside him as a part-time victims advocate and part-time psychic advisor for the Orange County Police Department. I'd seen more corpses than I cared to count. But this was different. This wasn't another case. This wasn't someone else's grieving family. This wasn't a stranger, lying dead in an unfamiliar house or street or field. The Grim Reaper would visit someone I loved today, and frankly, his timing sucked. My entire family, including the ones I hadn't seen since my wedding, was coming to celebrate my great-grandmother's 88th birthday. I didn't have time for someone to die. I had beans to bake, eggs to devil, and a gigantic cake to frost. Mommy, Grandma sent me to check on the macaroni salad. Jolene tilted her head and studied me with the same Caribbean blue eyes as her father. What's wrong? I wiped my cheeks with the back of my hand and lied. It's just pregnancy hormones. The former mini beauty queen glanced from my face to my swollen belly and back again. What's really wrong? I should have known better than to fib to a girl who spoke to spirits the way most people spoke to themselves. I'm not sure. Just a feeling I get sometimes.
Tessa, where's the charcoal? I've looked everywhere.
Aaron stopped in his tracks.
Why are you crying?
As if the two of them weren't enough, Bryson burst into the kitchen and headed straight for the refrigerator.
Is the yellow barbecue sauce in here? I can't find it.
When I'd walked down the aisle to not one, but two men, I'd imagined a life filled with love and laughter and double the sexy time. Sure, I had all of that, but I also had twice the honey, where's my, twice the laundry, and twice the chance of falling into the commode when one of them left the seat up. I forced myself to smile in hopes some of it would seep into my voice. It's on the door between Darlene's breast milk and the ketchup. He made a sour face.
Why is your mother's milk next to our condiments?
Grandma's fridge is too crowded. My voice went warbly, forcing me to clear my throat. Holding the sauce in one hand and a beer in the other, Bryson gave me a quick once-over.
Something wrong?
She says it's hormones. Jolene folded her arms and gave her fathers a smile that made me wonder who was parenting who. My men exchanged glances. They'd developed an entire language of nothing more than facial expressions, dimples, and non-committal sounds. Unless I missed my mark, they'd flipped a mental coin to see who would deal with the crazy pregnant lady. I'm fine. Jojo, go tell Grandma not to worry. Everything will be ready on time. I tossed the dish towel on the counter. Bryson, you should check the ribs. Smells like they're burning. Aaron, I need you to carry the coolers to the tent. All three stared. Aaron stepped forward and kissed my cheek. One hand on my belly, the other on my shoulder, he whispered,
Are you sure you're okay?
Peaches and cream, now go. I turned to the stove. Jolene, bless her heart, gave me an unexpected hug. The gesture left me struggling to hold back a fresh set of tears. Lord, I have no right to ask this, but please, don't take her or Bryson or Aaron or the baby I'm carrying. I bit my lip and added Dottie and Grandma to the list of people I couldn't live without. Aaron gave Bryson a quick nod and headed for the door. Rather than turning to face my remaining hubby, I busied myself by stirring the green beans. I'm not kidding. There's smoke billowing out of the grill. Grandma will have a fit if the meat is charcoaled.
Erin's taking care of it.
Bryson moved behind me and took the spoon from my hand.
Talk to me. What has you so upset?
Dodging the question, I said, "When did you decide who was taking care of what?"
Around the same time we decided I should be the one to find out why you're upset.
He wrapped his arms around me and rubbed my belly.
It's more than hormones. I can sense your unease in your spirit animal. Tell me what's wrong.
The warmth of his chest against my back soothed me in ways I still didn't understand. We were more than husband and wife. We were the last of our kind. Mates. Two magical beings that up until a year and a half ago I'd thought only existed in Cherokee fairy tales. As per usual, Bryson was right. My spirit animal, the firebird, hadn't so much as uttered a chirp since my premonition of an impending death. Normally, physical contact with either of my mates brought her to the surface, but today was far from normal. "Someone's going to die today." My hands flew to my mouth as if to keep more words from falling out. Saying them out loud made them real. I'd given them power by releasing them into the universe.
People die every day.
He turned me to face him.
But that isn't what you mean, is it?
"No." I nuzzled into his shoulder and breathed in his scent. Beneath the smoky smell of the grill lingered hints of sandalwood and fresh-cut lumber. "I can't explain it, but I'm never wrong. The last time was the day Charlie—" Bryson's arms tightened around me, but he craned his head toward the kitchen window. I followed his gaze to Erin and Jolene chasing the chocolate lab away from the barbecue grill. Beyond them, Grandma and Dottie hung sheets on the line to dry. Butterflies fluttered, birds sang, and the sun shined in a crisp blue sky.
Do you know who?
His voice came out as breathless as I felt. "No, it doesn't work like that." I eased from his embrace. "We shouldn't mention this to Grandma and Dottie, or anyone else for that matter. We have a party to pull off. We'll deal with whatever else lands in our laps when it happens." A slow grin crossed Bryson's face. I had the feeling I was the punchline in his private joke, but I couldn't resist touching his dimpled cheeks. "Something funny?"
That's a new way of looking at the world for you.
His deep brown eyes twinkled with amusement. "You're always telling me to stop borrowing trouble." I hitched my shoulder. "I thought I'd give it a try."
Good.
He kissed my forehead.
Erin and I will finish cooking and decorating. Go take a nap. I'll wake you before the party.
I wanted to argue there was too much to do, but my back hurt. Plus, I was pretty sure my feet and ankles were swollen, though I hadn't seen them in weeks. "Promise you'll wake me up if anything goes wrong. I want this day to be perfect for Grandma. She's getting up there. God knows how many more—" He pulled me back into his arms before I could finish the sentence.
No matter what happens today, we'll get through it.
I eased back and frowned at the wet blob of snot and tears on his shirt. So much for not borrowing trouble. Without a word, Bryson scooped me into his arms and carried me to the master bedroom. "Oh no! Put me down!" I couldn't help but groan. Don't get me wrong, I loved getting swept off my feet as much as the next girl, but I'd gained almost 30 pounds during the course of the pregnancy. "You're going to throw your back out."
I've got you.
He shouldered the door and laid me on the soft mattress. Gazing over my extra curvy body, he grinned again, only this time his eyes held something other than amusement.
You're beautiful.
You could join me. It won't take long." Between the way he stared and his purred words, I forgot about the to-do list and the party and death. I felt like a beached beluga with the sex drive of a rabbit, yet more proof that Mother Nature had a sense of humor.
"Tonight."
He pulled the blanket to my chin and kissed my lips.
"Graham May would beat me with a switch if I jiggled the baby loose on her big day."
He had a point. Chapter 2. "Tessa?" My mother's idea of a whisper had a lot in common with jackhammers. She touched my shoulder. "Tessa Marie, are you awake?" She'd pulled me out of such a deep sleep I didn't know how to answer the question. My brain sat at the crossroads between dreamland and reality, unsure of which way to turn. I concentrated on keeping my breathing even in the hope that she'd give up and go away. "Poor thing, she's exhausted," Darlene murmured. Two things dawned on me. She'd brought someone else into my bedroom, and I couldn't lay there playing opossum all afternoon, no matter how tempting. I had a party to host. "I'm up. What time is it?" "It's 3:30. Darlene planted her backside on the edge of the bed. "You remember Auntie Edna, don't you?" Sitting up, I locked gazes with the elderly woman and struggled to place her name. With almost 50 cousins and second cousins, more cousins once or twice removed, I couldn't keep track of everyone without consulting Graham May's family Bible. Auntie Edna smiled. "I haven't seen you since you were knee-high to a toadstool. I'm Jed's mama." "Nice to see you again." Jed. I hadn't seen my third stepfather since I was in grade school. The woman hadn't liked me back then, so much so she'd forbidden me from calling her Grandma. Thus the Auntie Edna business. Why on earth would she pay me a visit today? I gave Darlene a quick what-the-heck glance. My mother lifted her chin. "Sorry to wake you, but this is a matter of life and death." Oh, boy. To Darlene, a matter of life and death could mean anything from chipped nail polish to cancer, but it usually involved money. "Okay." Edna's voice softened. "It's Jed. He needs a new liver. The doctors say it's from too much salt." Nodding, I struggled to keep my eyeballs from rolling in their sockets. In the 6 months my mother had dated, married, and divorced Jed, I couldn't recall an instance when he hadn't had a drink in his hand. I highly doubted excess sodium intake had pickled his liver. Darlene set her hand on mine. "The family can't afford the medical costs." "That's awful. I can talk to Bryson, but I doubt we have any herbs or tinctures that can heal a failing liver." As the last of the Nunnehi, the Cherokee version of fairies, we'd served as the medicine man and woman for the local tribe for nearly 2 years. However, I doubted our magic could cure advanced cirrhosis. "Oh, no, that's not the sort of help we need." Darlene laughed too high and too loud. "We need you to help us find something." Edna said, "My husband, rest his soul, hid our retirement money. The man didn't believe in banks." Uh-huh. I seemed to recall Graham May going on about my step-grandfather's shenanigans. He had believed in banks all right, but his withdrawals allegedly involved ski masks and shotguns. "I'd love to help, but please, you're our last hope." Edna's voice rose. "Your mama showed me your wedding video. I never would have believed it unless I saw it with my own 2 eyes. She's talking about Charlie's ghost raising your veil. Darlene beamed with the sort of pride most parents reserved for winning spelling bees and high school graduations. I needed 4 more hours of sleep and a pot of coffee before I had this conversation. Yes, the spirit of my deceased grandfather had walked me down the aisle. While most of the guests couldn't see him, everyone present had witnessed my veil mysteriously rising and settling back into place when he'd kissed my cheek. All you have to do is reach out to the great beyond and ask a simple question. Darlene's voice held an edge of irritation. I could do a summoning spell, ask the man where he'd hidden the money, and send him back. Only nothing involving magic was as easy-peasy as it seemed. 1, I had mixed feelings about finding stolen money. 2, spirits didn't always cooperate. 3, I'd promised Bryson I wouldn't use magic until I had the baby. I'm not sure I can help you. My mother's eyes widened. Why, ever not? Even if I did reach him, which I'm not sure I can, there's no guarantee he'll share his secrets. Regardless, you have to try. She spoke as if the matter were settled. You can't go and do something spooky in front of all those people and turn around and pretend you aren't a channel. Her word choice surprised me. Alarm bells went off in my head. Channel? Yes, that's what people who talk to the dead are called. The technical term is channeling psychic forces. My mother stiffened her spine. Some people are downright jealous of your powers. The alarm bells turned to tornado sirens. Of course, she had it all wrong. I was neither of those things. But I couldn't set her straight for several reasons. 1, we weren't alone. 2, the I'm not human talk would lead her to learning she wasn't my real mother. 3, I didn't have time for this. Thankfully, Edna interrupted. Wringing her hands, she glanced from me to my mother and back again. Jed will die without a new liver? I'm sorry, but I can't. Darlene flubbed her lips. Tessa Marie, you've talked to spirits since you were a little girl. You've found missing kids and solved countless murders. When will you start believing in yourself and your abilities? Mama. I scooted to the edge of the bed and pushed to my feet. I didn't want to have this conversation at all, but I certainly didn't want to have it while in bed. My mother stood and smoothed her too short skirt over her hips. If you can't do it, I know someone who can. Jolene. My adopted daughter had more psychic talent in her pinky toe than I did in my entire body. But I'd be damned if I allowed Darlene to drag her into the drama. No way. You leave her out of this. We've worked our butts off to give her a normal life. Darlene lifted an eyebrow. I recognized the expression as an ultimatum. One way or the other, she intended to get her way. What are you getting out of this? She laughed and waved her hand. That's none of your concern. I turned to Edna. You promised her a cut of the money? The elderly woman pressed her lips into a thin line. My spidey sense went from a tingle to all-out electric shocks. How much? The women exchanged glances. Darlene frowned. Fine. She's given me 15% of the loot. I'd planned to give you half for my soon-to-be-born grandbaby, a college fund. I met Edna's gaze. I'll do it, but you can keep my cut. Darlene bristled but remained blessedly quiet. The older woman sighed as if she'd set down a heavy load. Against my better judgment, I found myself feeling sorry for her. I couldn't imagine losing a child, even one that had knocked back a bottle of whiskey a day for half his life. The thought stopped me cold. Could Jed's situation be the cause of my premonition? Would he make it to see another sunrise? Technically, he was family. I doubted a former stepdad would count, but a girl could hope. Not that I wished for his death, but if I had to choose... Edna pulled an old bandana out of her handbag. This belonged to my husband. I saw one of those psychics on the TV. They needed a personal item to contact the spirit. I took a closer look at the fabric and cringed. Holey and faded was one thing, but it looked like it hadn't been washed in decades. Is that mud? Blood? She shrugged. He had it on him the day he died. I took an involuntary step back. Thanks, but all I need is his full name.
Tessa?
Aaron stood in the doorway, staring between me and the bloody bandana.
People are starting to arrive.
I could have kissed him for saving me from Darlene and her ex-mother-in-law. Instead, I plastered on a smile and turned back to Edna. Write his full name on a piece of paper and leave it with Darlene. I'll see what I can do tomorrow night. Why not now? Once again, the pitch of my mother's voice made my molars ache. Because tomorrow is a new moon, and the spell will work much better. I lied through my teeth. Human magic relied on moon phases and candles and props, but I wasn't human. As a Nunnehi, my powers were as much a part of me as my heart or lungs. Aaron folded his arms and studied the women as if daring either one of them to say another word. He'd always been protective of me, but since we'd learned I was pregnant, he'd gone into Papa Bear mode. Thank you. Edna stuffed the bandana back into her bag and headed for the door. Darlene, on the other hand, smirked and shook her head. Honestly, Tessa Marie, would it kill you to make a little money off your God-given abilities? It just might. I flashed her a grin. We better get out there before Graham May comes looking for us. She huffed and eased past Aaron. He waited until she'd left the room before whispering,
What was that about?
They want me to summon the spirit of a bank robber and ask him where he hid the money. He gave me a yeah, right look. Holding his gaze, I remained silent until he shook his head.
And you agreed to it?
Darlene wasn't going to take no for an answer. I walked to the dressing table and pulled my hair into a messy bun. Stepdad number 3 needs a new liver, and the family can't afford the medical bills. Besides, my mother threatened to get Jojo involved. He made a sound far too close to a growl for my liking. Relax. I slid my arms around him and rested my head on his chest. I'll give it a shot. The chances of actually getting information from the spirit are slim to none.
Bryson isn't going to like this.
Neither do I, but it's a teensy little spell. I'll be careful. Aaron embraced me.
Promise me you won't exert yourself. Magic comes with a price.
I promise. I eased back and stared into his blue eyes. Kiss me. I need strength before I face the insanity known as my family. He brushed his lips across mine.
All families are crazy. We don't get to choose them. All we can do is love them for who they are.
I admire your optimism, but I'll consider the day a success if we get through this without anyone calling 911. Chapter 3. By the time I made it outside, the yard resembled a colonial-era battlefield. Besides the large food and drink tents, several people had brought smaller canopies to fend off the afternoon sun. Though the calendar read October, autumn hadn't quite made it to Florida. Most of the partygoers were related by blood or marriage, but rather than gathering under the larger tents, they stayed in small encampments. If I had a giant magic marker, I could draw enemy lines on the grass. This half didn't speak to that half because of a 20-year-old feud. Others didn't give a flying fig about the larger feud. They disliked both sides. The fact that so many had turned up said a lot about Grandma. A shiver shot down my spine. What will happen to the family when she's gone? Please, God, don't take her tonight. She's the glue that holds us all together. Anyone else would have asked what I was talking about, but not Aaron. He brought my hand to his lips.
Yes, she is.
I tugged my elastic waistband up over my belly for the 4th time in 5 minutes and made my way down the porch steps. Leaning close, he whispered,
You look gorgeous.
I squelched the instinct to point out I was huge and tell him to have his eyes checked. Instead, I soaked in the compliment and squeezed his hand. Thank you. The woman of the hour stepped out from the food tent and grinned like a dog in a boneyard. There you are, sleepyhead. My smile came easy. The journey to her open arms did not. I started with a jog and ended up holding my chest with one hand and my belly with the other. Happy birthday! You shouldn't be running. Laughing, she embraced me. Or tried to. Between her short stature and the baby getting in the way, we did a sideways half-hug. I won't do it again. I leaned closer to whisper, I think I sprained a boob. My great-grandmother smirked. Wouldn't surprise me. Those things are as big as the footballs the boys are tossing around. Now that's a dirty joke waiting to happen. Aunt Dottie laughed and slung her arm around my shoulders. I glanced between the two most important women in my world and blinked back tears. I'd never known my biological mother, not unless speaking to her spirit now and then counted. Darlene? Well, was Darlene. She hadn't been around much when I was growing up. Most of my life, I'd resented not having a normal mom, so much so I'd failed to realize how truly blessed I was. Dottie and Grandma had not only raised me, they'd taught me what it meant to be a woman. I couldn't lose either of them. Not now. Maybe not ever. Dottie dried my cheeks. Oh, honey, those pregnancy hormones getting you again? I was just thinking how much you both did for me when I was growing up. I laughed, but it came out more like a sob. How much you still do for me. Grandma tilted her head, likely sensing my half-truth. Why don't we go sit in the shade and have one of those husbands of yours fetch us some sweet tea? Still sniffling, I nodded and followed them beneath the tent. Tessa, my lord, you are gigantic. I recognized my cousin Lulu's sing-song voice instantly. Rather than faking a smile or exchanging niceties, I chose to take the high road and ignore her. Instead, I sat my ever-expanding backside in a lounge chair and propped my feet up. Grandma set her hands on her hips. Lula Rose, I know your mama taught you if you don't have anything nice to say, keep your mouth shut. The woman had the good sense to dip her chin and murmur, Yes, ma'am. As if sensing my frustration, Maddie, our chocolate lab, bounded over and sat beside me. Scratching the dog calmed my nerves and gave me an excuse not to make eye contact with my obnoxious cousin. If I ignored her long enough, maybe she'd take the hint and go away. Lula Rose had married my cousin Tank 6 years ago, 5 months before their son TJ was born. Since then, She'd bounced in and out of their lives and into more men's beds than I could count on two hands. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't understand why Tank continued to take her back. The odor of alcohol, sweat, and cheap perfume accompanied Lulu as she plopped into the chair beside me. "When are you due?" "Not for another 6 weeks." Saying the words aloud made my feet hurt. Another month and a half seemed like an eternity. "Are you sure you aren't carrying twins?" She cocked her head, shrugged, and guzzled half a beer. "I mean, you do have 2 husbands. What if it works like dogs and you're pregnant with one from each of them?" I swallowed back a mouthful of words that would send Grandma running for the ivory soap and patted myself on the back for acting like a grown-up. "There's only one. How's TJ doing in school?" "He's like his dad. Easy on the eyes, but not real bright." Like a shark scenting blood in the water, she circled back. "Which one of them is the father?" I couldn't decide which bothered me more, her insulting her husband and child, or questioning the paternity of mine. It doesn't matter. The baby will be blessed with 2 wonderful fathers. Dottie stared down her nose like Lulu was something stuck to the bottom of her sneaker. "If you say so." She finished the Bud Light and tossed the empty container under her chair. Maddie walked over, sniffed the bottle, and sneezed several times. As if on cue, TJ ran into the tent screaming like the devil was on his tail. Tears left twin streaks down the dirt on his little red face. "Mama, a bee! I got bit by a bee!" Lulu held her arm up to prevent him from climbing into her lap. "Go find your daddy. I'm in the middle of an important conversation with Tessa." There goes her Mother of the Year award. I wiggled around in an effort to hoist myself out of the chair. "I'll take him inside and make sure the stinger's out." "TJ, I said go find your daddy." She shot me a warning look, as if daring me to contradict her. Without a word, Grandma stood, took the boy's hand, and guided him through the onlookers to her house. I closed my eyes and counted to 10. When that didn't help, I counted to 20. Everyone had their own parenting style, but Lulu's tap-danced into the realm of neglect. Someone needed to make a law that required people to take classes and get a license before they were allowed to give birth. Just when I thought the conversation couldn't get any worse, Lulu rose, pressed her fingers to her temples, and stared off into space as if listening to some unseen force. She nodded once, smiled, and turned her attention back to me. "My guardians tell me he wasn't stung. He fell and landed on a sand spur." Maddie growled, and the hair along her spine rose. My mouth fell open. I had a million questions and snarky responses for her, but nothing would come out. Sand spurs hurt almost as much as bee stings. Dottie shook her head and followed after Grandma. "Maddie, come." The dog remained between me and Lulu. I blinked a few times to restart my brain. I knew better than to ask, but my curiosity got the better of me. "Guardians?" She grinned like a gator with a full belly. Crap. I'd fallen into her trap. "Yes, guardians." Lulu rose, stared off again, and chuckled. "You're not the only one in this family with psychic abilities. I've been taking classes. My mentor says I am the most gifted student he's ever taught." Dollars to donuts, she's sleeping with her so-called mentor. I nodded, not in agreement, but because I had no idea what to say to her. Darlene had mentioned people were jealous of me. I should have assumed she meant Lulu. While the two weren't besties, they did hang out at the same bars. TJ ran into the tent with a clean face and a shiny new Band-Aid on his thigh. Balancing on one leg, he lifted the other to show off his battle wounds. "Grandma fixed me up. It wasn't a bee." Rather than acknowledging her son, Lulu Rose smirked at me. "I told you." I held my hands up. I didn't say a word, but boy, did I ever have a few choice ones for her. It occurred to me that I could kill 2 pains in my backside with 1 stone by telling Lulu about Mrs. Clemens needing to contact her dead husband. Unfortunately for me, I didn't feel right turning her loose on an unsuspecting elderly lady. Besides, it looked like justice was about to be served. My great-grandmother marched across the lawn to Tank. She jutted her chin forward and set her hands on her hips, classic lecture posture. From the looks of it, the conversation set his blood pressure into the stratosphere. People always say that karma will come back and bite the assholes of the world, but Grandma worked much faster.
Lulu Rose, a word in private.
The man reminded me of a bull, a large, pissed-off bull ready to take down 6 cowboys and the rodeo clown. Much like she'd done with TJ, my cousin ignored her husband. "My mentor says everyone has guardians, but most folks don't even know they are there. Mine came to me the first time I meditated. Do you speak to yours?" I watched the oncoming argument like a slow-motion car crash. Tank leaned close to Lulu and lowered his voice.
We should go.
Her eyes widened. "I'm not going anywhere."
You're drunk.
"Screw you!" She slapped him so quickly I barely saw her hand move. He took his wife by the arm and lifted her from the chair. Maddie inched closer to me but remained silent. Weird, considering she'd given Lulu a warning growl a few minutes before. "Get your hands off me!" She jerked and wiggled like a fish dangling from a hook. "I'm not drunk, and I'm not going anywhere with you." The big guy glanced around at the growing number of spectators, released her, and lowered his voice.
Get in the truck. Now.
I eased myself out of the line of fire. The way these two were glaring at each other, I feared it wouldn't be long until the situation disintegrated and someone called the police. Thankfully, I had my own personal detective on the premises. Aaron appeared out of nowhere and placed himself between me and the feuding couple. Using his official police voice, he said,
Is there a problem?
Lulu's expression went from angry to triumphant, to something akin to a beaten puppy. "Thank God you're here. He came out of nowhere and manhandled me." Crap. She'd not only taken things out of context, she'd forgotten to mention who landed the first blow. Aaron folded his arms.
Look, this is a family party. I'm sure neither of you wants to see the other arrested for assault.
"You're going to arrest my mama and daddy?" At some point during the drama, TJ had wandered into the fray. Lower lip trembling, the boy glanced from his parents to Aaron.
Not if I can help it.
He set his hand on TJ's shoulder. "Oh, yes, you are. I absolutely want you to lock him up. He's bruised my arm." Lulu made a show of wincing when she touched the alleged injury. "It might be broken." Double crap! She'd left me no choice but to get into the middle of it and in front of her kid, no less. She slapped him first, and I highly doubt she'll have a mark, let alone a fractured bone. Frowning, Aaron turned back to the couple.
Is this true?
Tank nodded and Lulu glared. I'd heard the expression, "if looks could kill, you'd be 6 feet under," a million times, but at that moment, I felt it in my gut. Worse still, My firebird responded to Lulu's energy as if she were a physical threat. I wasn't imagining things. The woman hated me. As if things weren't tense enough, the damned dog launched into a series of deep, thundering barks. "Maddie! Down!" I reached for her, but she darted to the left, keeping Lulu in her line of vision. Likely feeling my magic rising to the surface, Aaron grabbed my hand.
Like I said, I'm not interested in arresting anyone at Grandma's birthday party. I suggest one of you go home and cool off.
TJ ran to his father and wrapped himself around Tank's legs. "I want to stay here with Daddy." "Fine, whatever, I'll go." Lulu held her hand out. "You two find a ride home, I'm taking the truck." I bit the inside of my cheek and waited for someone to mention she'd sailed past the legal blood alcohol limit several beers ago. Tank, bless his big heart, handed her a ring overloaded with keys. "Wait." I drew a breath and gathered my courage. "She's in no shape to drive." Lulu went from 60 to 0 quicker than the time it took me to blink. 1 second she glared, red-faced and angry. The next, she stared, as if she were looking right through me. No emotion, no reaction, nothing. It scared the willies out of me. I'd dealt with enough psychopaths to recognize something wasn't right in Lululand. Maddie must have felt the shift in her energy, too. The dog let out a howled whine.
Give me a sec to get my wallet and I'll drive you home.
Aaron patted his leg.
Maddie, come.
Thankfully, the lab hurried after him. Tank knelt in front of TJ.
Everything's okay now. Go play with Jojo until time to eat.
Lulu Rose turned and embraced me. The firebird burned inside me, begging to be released. Whatever my spirit animal sensed, she didn't care for it. Not one bit. A reckoning is coming, and I can't wait to watch you bleed. Lulu Rose pulled back and flashed me a smile. Chapter 4. Since my grandfather had passed away, I'd learned I wasn't quite human, had died twice, faced magic-wielding murderers, run-of-the-mill serial killers, ghosts, wolves, snakes, and all sorts of tribal politics, but I'd never been this terrified. Around me, people ate, drank, and celebrated my great-grandmother's birthday, but I stood dumbstruck, watching Aaron's car bounce down the uneven driveway. Bryson set his hands on my shoulders and turned me to face him.
What did Lulu say to you?
She threatened me, said there was a reckoning coming and she wanted to see me bleed. My knees turned to jelly. Holy crap on a cracker! My husband had driven off with a crazy woman. Aaron shouldn't be in the car with her. She's dangerous. Bryson blinked, seeming to take in what I said. Call him and tell him to come back. My voice thinned and my panic thickened. The premonition! Call him! Bryson's jaw tensed, and magic buzzed beneath his skin. I wasn't the only one having a hard time controlling my spirit animal. The longer we stood there, the longer Lulu had to do something horrible to Aaron. I patted my pockets in hopes I'd remembered my cell. I hadn't. Give me your phone. We have to warn him.
You need to sit.
He guided me back to my lawn chair, pulled out his phone, and made the call. Keeping his voice low, Bryson said,
Be careful. She threatened Tessa.
Tell him to come back. Someone else can drive her home. I chewed my thumbnail and waited for my world to shatter.
We'll be here.
He nodded at me, went silent and disconnected. I stared slack-jawed. You didn't tell him what I said.
He'll be okay. He's dropping her off at that dive bar on Main Street.
Bryson crouched in front of me.
Should be back within 10 minutes.
My chest tightened, making it hard to catch my breath. Fireflies danced in my peripheral vision, and my skin felt too tight. I leaned forward in an effort to put my head between my knees, but my baby bump got in the way. Bryson wrapped me in his arms.
Easy. Focus on the sound of my voice. Breathe in and out. I got you. I'm not going to let anything happen to you or Aaron.
The physical contact with my mate helped the panic attack to ebb enough for me to speak. Can't promise that.
You're right, but Aaron can take care of himself.
He cradled my head against his chest.
And no one would be stupid enough to try to hurt you when you're in my arms.
He had a point. 2 points. But I'd learned long ago that bad things happen without warning. No one planned to get hurt. Or worse, a male cleared his throat to my left. I lifted my head and met Tank's gaze.
Are you all right?
He might have been built like a linebacker, but under the muscle and redneck bravado beat the heart of a teddy bear. I'll be okay. Sniffling, I pulled away from Bryson. What's going on with Lulu? He shrugged.
She's drinking again and not sleeping much. The doctor says she has sleep paralysis.
Sleep what? The title seemed fairly self-explanatory, but I had to ask.
It's when your brain wakes up before your body. She's aware of what's going on but can't talk or move. It freaks her out.
Bryson said,
I can put together an herbal tea that will help her rest. I'd appreciate that.
His shoulders slumped.
I'm worried about her. She wakes up in a puddle of sweat and smells awful.
I knew all about night sweats and B.O. Did the doctor check her hormones?
Hell if I know.
I'm sure he ran tests. Hormone imbalances and sleep deprivation both can cause mood swings. I strongly suspected Lulu had bigger problems than not getting enough shut-eye. He glanced around before leaning closer.
She's been hateful toward TJ.
So, today wasn't an isolated incident? The more I thought about it, the more I kicked myself for not realizing something was seriously wrong earlier. Lulu Rose cheated on her husband as often as most women cheated on their diets, but she was a good mother. When she was around.
She's been like that for a couple months now.
Tank took his ball cap off and wiped his brow on his sleeve.
I hate to say it, but I think she's stepping out on me again.
I had the exact same thought, but I knew better than to comment. Instead, I glanced away.
Would you mind keeping TJ tonight? Things might get loud at home. No problem.
Bryson spoke without hesitation. No surprise, he'd do anything to help a child. It was one of the things I loved most about him. Mommy! Jojo waved her arms as she ran in our direction with TJ on her heels. From the looks of it, both kids had gone for a swim in a mud puddle. Half her hair had escaped from her braids and stuck out in all directions. It's time! It's time! Clueless, I plastered on a smile. Time for what? TJ rolled his eyes. Don't tell her. It's supposed to be a surprise. Bryson chuckled.
The surprise has to wait until Aaron returns.
Both kids' facial expressions deflated like balloons in a needle factory. I nudged his side. What's going on? He dipped his chin and ran his hand over the back of his neck. I couldn't recall ever seeing him look so bashful. It shocked the worry right out of me. Don't tell her or Grandma will take a switch to your backside. TJ grinned. Ooh, maybe you should tell her. It'd be fun watching you get a whooping. Bryson's laughter brightened my mood better than a double shot espresso on a Monday morning.
The only one getting a whooping around here's name starts with a T and ends with a J.
Tank wrangled the squirming boy into his arms. A piece of my heart chipped off. Lulu's behavior didn't just affect me. These two lived with her, relied on her, loved her. How could she not see it or not care? Daddy! Jojo spotted Aaron's car and took off like a misfired arrow. He barely managed to open his door before she grabbed his hand and dragged him toward the dessert tent.
That's our cue.
Bryson helped me to my feet. Tell me what's going on. You know I don't like surprises. I batted my lashes. He slung his arm over my shoulders.
You'll see.
Uh-huh. But what if I'm so surprised I go into labor?
Not going to happen.
He tugged me close and kissed the top of my head. We joined Aaron under the tent, and I stopped dead in my tracks. While red and white streamers and balloons decorated the rest of the property, this area was done up in light blue. It's a boy? Nodding, my men grinned like a couple of kids at an all-you-can-eat candy buffet. We'd had 2 sonograms, but disagreed whether we should learn the baby's sex. They wanted to know. I wanted a gender reveal party like they did in the movies. We'd all gotten our wish. Aaron motioned to the far side of the tent.
There's more.
I didn't think my heart could handle much more. We were having a boy. Exactly what I'd wished for. One of each. A little brother for Jolene. Gift-wrapped boxes covered a long table in the back. The poor thing practically bowed under the weight of the presents, but the banner hanging from the posts stole my breath. We'd tossed around so many baby names over the previous months, my head spun. In the end, we'd agreed they'd choose a name if it was a boy, and I'd pick if it was a girl. Someone special, someone dear. Quincy Emmett Charles will soon be here. Resting my hand on my belly, I whispered, Quincy Emmett Charles. I love it. It's perfect.
Thank goodness. These two about drove me crazy trying to come up with something. I had to step in and save the poor child from a lifetime of teasing.
Grandma pulled me into an embrace. Wait. I glanced from her to my husband's and back. You named him?
I sure did.
Her eyes twinkled with mischief.
These two were set on a mishmash like that Bradgelina or Benifer.
I furrowed my brow, trying to think of how in the world they'd combine Aaron and Bryson. Arson? Or Briar? Several of my family members burst out laughing.
Briar.
Bryson cleared his throat.
Grandma helped us come to our senses.
Aaron chuckled.
It's Quincy after my father, Emmett after his, and Charles goes without saying. We thought we'd call him Quinn for short.
Grandma said,
I hope you don't mind sharing your baby shower with my birthday party.
Once again I fought back tears. She'd not only named my baby, but had done all of this for me. It's perfect. All of it. Thank you.
I thought you said men at baby showers was against nature,
Darlene called from the crowd.
Even an old woman can change her mind.
Grandma jutted out her chin.
Bryson, it's about time to pull the chicken out of the smoker. Aaron, go inside and get the baked beans from the oven. Everyone else, line up and get it while it's hot.
A chorus of yes ma'ams rang out. 2 things my family could agree upon: food and following Grandma's orders. My mother waited until the others had gone before she approached me. "There's been a heck of a lot of drama for a party. More than normal, even for this family." She slipped me a piece of paper. "His name was Ezekiel Clemens, but he went by Zeke. I meant what I said. There are no guarantees, but I'll give it a try on 2 conditions. You leave Jolene out of it, and you promise to knock before you come into my bedroom." "Done and done." She cracked a half smile. "How are you holding up?" I hitched a shoulder. "Honestly, I'm not sure." She tucked a curl behind my ear. "Want to talk about it?" This side of my mother always surprised me. I was used to stunts like her showing up in my bedroom with random people and coercing me into finding money. The kinder, gentler side of Darlene hadn't emerged until she'd met her current husband, Stone. Having my little brother had softened her up even more. I drew a shaky breath. "Mama, do you think Grandma did all of this because she knows she won't be around to see little Quincy grow up?" She glanced away. "I do, but think of it as a blessing. Not many babies get the chance to meet their great-great-grandmothers." "You're right." Her words touched me, but they did nothing to ease the tightness in my chest. The baby wasn't due for another 6 weeks, and I knew, as sure as the sun would rise tomorrow, someone I cared about wouldn't be alive to see it. "Of course I am. Fathers may know best, but mothers are always right." Darlene patted my shoulder and walked toward the food tent. She couldn't have gone more than 5 steps before she turned around. "Don't forget to bring the sheets in before dark. It's bad luck to leave them out." "Yes, Mama." I rolled my eyes. Southerners had more superstitions than storm clouds and raindrops. My mother pointed a bony finger in my direction. "Sass me all you want, but don't come crying to me when you wake up with a boo-hag riding you." Chapter 5. The rest of the party had gone off without a hitch, thank goodness. I didn't think I could handle any more surprises, good or bad. I planted myself in Charlie's old recliner and turned on the television. My body craved sleep, but my thoughts rattled and spun like an unbalanced washing machine.
I'll get TJ into the shower and JoJo on standby.
Aaron gave me a drive-by kiss on his way to wrangle the kids. "Make sure you tell him to wash both sides of his head." The last time the little bugger had spent the night, he'd managed to shampoo the left side of his hair, leaving the right side smelling like swamp water. Maddie trotted out of the kitchen and curled up in her dog bed. Her behavior with Lulu earlier in the day bugged me. She'd only acted so aggressively once, and I couldn't blame her for that. Having the ghost of a murder victim show up in my bathroom hadn't sat well with me either. Bryson set a mug of herbal tea on the table beside me.
How are you feeling?
"Tired, but my brain isn't ready to turn off just yet." I took a sip of the steaming liquid. Maddie was acting weird around Lulu earlier. Or it might be accurate to say Lulu was acting weird and the dog responded.
Weird how?
I explained about TJ, the bee sting that turned out to be a sand spur, and about Lulu allegedly talking to her guardians. The thing is, Maddie started growling when Lulu did her mumbo-jumbo.
Maybe Lulu was communicating with something.
Could be. All I know is she scared me today. She was angry 1 second, and stone cold the next. It was like someone turned out the lights. That's when she threatened me. He went quiet, so much so I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from feeling the silence.
I knew something was wrong when I felt the Firebird rise. At the time, I thought I was responding to your magic, but now...
Bryson sat beside the dog and idly stroked her back.
I lowered the wards for the party, but I'll put them back up first thing in the morning. If Lulu is channeling something who means you harm, she won't be able to cross them.
I remembered the scrap of paper in my pocket. There's something else you should know. His shoulders tensed. Darlene asked me to summon the spirit of her third husband's father. Seems old Mr. Clements buried some cash, and his widow needs it to pay for my ex-stepfather's medical bills. He quirked a brow, likely trying to make sense of who was who. I sighed. Jed, my former stepdad, needs a new liver. Evidently, he's in bad shape. There's not much time.
I don't like it. You're too far along to risk exerting yourself with unnecessary magic.
Aaron sighed from the doorway between the living room and the hall.
Unnecessary magic aside, it's a bad idea. You're talking about recovering stolen money.
Oh, great. Now both men were telling me what to do. I have to do this. I couldn't live with myself if Jed died because I refused to at least try to help. Aaron frowned.
Can it wait a few weeks?
I said no at the same time Bryson said yes. Baby Quinn chose that moment to land a ninja-level kick to my bladder that left me wincing. I pressed my hand to my belly. Oh, no. Don't you start weighing in on this, too. The guys laughed. It's a tiny bit of magic. I doubt I'll even reach him, but at least I can say I tried.
Do what you think is best.
Aaron gave me a quick nod and turned for the hall.
TJ, you have to dry off before you put your PJs on.
Another sharp kick stole my breath. Ouch! Bryson placed both hands on my belly, leaned close, and spoke to the baby.
Time to settle down tonight, little one.
I ran my fingers through his long, dark hair. I love his name.
I'm glad.
He glanced up at me and smiled the sort of smile designed to melt a woman's heart.
It meant a lot to Graham May to surprise you today.
My throat tightened. If I didn't do something quick, I'd turn into a sobbing puddle of tears. Go help Aaron with the kids. I have a mushy made-for-TV movie with my name on it.
Already? I thought the romance movie marathon didn't start until the holidays.
I DVR'd them last year. I might have married 2 men, but I refused to give up my favorite guilty pleasure. Besides, I didn't complain when they spent hours and hours watching sports. He kissed my belly, then my lips.
Aaron can handle the kids. I'll be in the kitchen if you need me.
I hit play and settled in for an hour and a half of a cotton candy love story featuring a city girl set on selling a farm and the cowboy determined to show her the virtues of country living. About 30 minutes into the movie, I caught Aaron leaning against the wall staring at the television. You can watch it with me if you want. I paused the movie. He startled.
What? No. I'm just waiting for the kids to go to the bathroom one more time before I tuck them in.
Uh-huh. I stared until he slunk away. A few minutes later, he returned.
The kids are clean, teeth brushed, and tucked in.
Thank you.
Anytime, sweetheart.
Aaron kissed my cheek and headed for the kitchen. I thought he'd gone to help Bryson put away the leftovers, but caught him standing in the doorway watching the movie again. Seriously? I couldn't help but laugh. There's no shame in embracing your feminine side. He squared his shoulders.
Okay, but who's the blonde and what's she doing in the guy's barn?
I hit pause. His ex. She's conniving to get him back.
Gotcha.
He glanced from me to the couch, as if considering the logistics of snuggling with a pregnant woman on such a narrow space. Don't get any ideas. Last time we tried to watch a movie together, we ended up naked and sweaty.
What's wrong with naked and sweaty?
He gave me his signature boy-next-door grin. I'm immune to your charms, Detective Burns. My butt isn't leaving this chair until the credits roll." He chuckled and stretched out on the couch. 5 minutes later, his snores had me increasing the volume on the TV. Bryson emerged from the kitchen. The mountain of dirty dishes he'd climbed had left his T-shirt half soaked. He took one look at Aaron and sighed.
Should I wake him? Or let him sleep out here tonight?
I paused the movie for the umpteenth time. At this rate, it'd take me 4 hours to get through it. But I didn't complain, nor did I care. Family drama and impending death aside, I was one heck of a lucky woman. Leave him be until I'm ready to turn in.
Need anything before I get a shower?
I have everything I could ever want or need.
I feel the same.
Bryson tilted his head and took me in for a long moment before walking down the hall. I'd no sooner hit play again when Aaron kicked the arm of the sofa hard enough to rattle the end table. Holding my breath, I waited to see if he'd wake. He muttered something and rolled over. Grown men having puppy dreams amused me, unless, of course, they knocked over a lamp. I pointed the remote at the television and cast a quick glance in his direction. Nothing. No snores, no twitching, no donkey kicks. Let's try this again. I hit play. He shouted,
"The hell happened here?"
I opened my mouth to wake him, but he started to snore again. No, not snoring. The sound he made reminded me of a toddler with a head cold struggling to breathe around the snot. The next time he hollered, I couldn't make out his words, but I could feel the magic inside him rising. More troubling, a fine layer of sweat broke out across his face. Fever dreams? I wiggled forward and pushed down on the footrest with all my strength. It took 3 tries, but I managed to collapse the darn thing and stand. "Aaron? Honey, are you okay?" He mumbled something about a murder victim and calling for backup. I placed my hand on his forehead, expecting to find him burning up, but his skin was cold. Too cold. "Aaron, wake up!" He exhaled a stuttered, rattling breath, and the tension left his body. He left his body. My heart slammed into my sternum. No! I shook him hard enough to crack his molars. Aaron didn't respond, but an odor like 3-week-old potato salad in the sun filled the room. "Bryson!" Resting my head on Aaron's chest, I listened for a heartbeat. Nothing. "Bryson, help! Oh, God, no, not him." The feeling of doom I'd carried with me all day washed over me like a tidal wave. Knees shaking, I leaned over him to listen and watch for signs of respiration. "Please breathe. Please."
What's wrong?
Bryson skidded to a halt beside the couch.
What's that smell?
"CPR." My brain spun out of control, but I couldn't put together a coherent thought. "Floor."
Step back.
Bryson's magic exploded through the room. The force of it staggered me. He shoved the coffee table out of the way and jerked Aaron's lifeless body to the ground. "Mommy?" Jolene's voice pulled my attention away from my mates. The girl stood in her pink polka dot pajamas, watching as one father tried to determine if the other was breathing. I hurried to her and blocked her view of the horror. Struggling to get past me, she screamed, "What's wrong with him? Why isn't he waking up?" Bryson shouted,
I'm going to bring him back, Jojo. I swear it.
Chapter 6. "But he's not dead." Jolene broke free of my grasp and darted to her father's. I couldn't find the words to tell her the truth. Not that I knew what the truth was. Bryson had brought Aaron back from the dead once before, But he'd shared a piece of his soul to do it. Could he do it again? Could I help him, share my magic? We were stronger when we worked together, but would it be too much? Would it endanger the baby? Jolene placed a hand on each side of Bryson's face and forced him to look at her. He's not dead. I don't see his ghost. Bryson stilled. I couldn't see his energy with my eyes, but I could feel it fanning out over Aaron's body.
She's right.
He sucked in a breath.
There's still a spark of life inside him, but...
But what? My knees threatened to buckle. I had no choice but to sag against the wall.
His spirit is... missing?
Bryson glanced from Aaron to me, and finally to Jolene.
Can you call to him?
The girl nodded and closed her eyes so hard her nose wrinkled. Daddy, you have to come back now. A gust of icy air lifted my hair. Jolene had split the veil between the physical world and the one beyond, wide open, something I didn't have the ability to do if I wanted to. Her power scared the ever-loving crap out of me. We had no idea what she was truly capable of. Not to mention, any number of ghostly creepy crawlies could come through the tear. Two things happened. The horrid smell left the room, and Aaron gasped, as if breaking the surface of a phantom ocean. It was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. Bryson let out a choked sob.
Welcome back.
Jolene threw herself against Aaron. She'd put on a brave face, but now that the crisis had ended, her tears flowed freely. The girl had been exposed to more death in her 10 years than most adults, including her mother's murder.
Hey, what's all of this about?
Aaron draped an arm around her and lifted his head.
Did I roll off the couch? Something like that.
Bryson helped him sit upright.
How are you feeling? Like I had a good night's sleep?
Furrowing his brow, he took in the scene around him.
What happened?
Bryson and I exchanged glances. I didn't quite know the answer, nor did I want to discuss it in front of a child. Jolene, on the other hand, had no qualms. You left your body? Most of you, anyway.
Uh-huh.
Aaron glanced at me.
What exactly does that mean?
I'm not entirely sure. You were having a nightmare. Next thing I knew, you stopped breathing and I couldn't get a pulse. He ran his hand over his head.
I was dreaming about a crime scene. It felt so damned real. It sounds like you were dreamwalking.
Bryson's jaw tensed.
Has this happened before? Dying in my sleep?
Aaron barked out a laugh.
Not that I'm aware of.
You didn't die. Jolene yawned. He gave me a wide-eyed stare over the top of her head. A cry for help if I'd ever seen one. Now that we know everything's okay, it's time for bed. It's been a long day. I held my hand out to the girl. Come on, Jojo. I'll tuck you in.
I have her.
Bryson stood and scooped her into his arms. She groaned. I'm not a baby. I know what you're doing. You're using code for you'll talk about this after I'm not here. Aaron burst out laughing, the second sweetest sound I'd ever heard.
You're right, but it's way past everyone's bedtime. We'll talk about this in the morning.
I sank onto the couch and closed my eyes. Suffering from an adrenaline crash, I didn't have the strength to hold back my emotions. Much like Jolene had done moments before, I let the tears flow.
Hey.
Aaron sat beside me.
Sorry I scared you. That had to be rough.
Terrifying. I've been waiting for someone to die all day. When I couldn't wake you, I curled against him. It's probably a sin to say this out loud, but I'd rather someone else bit the big one. He lifted my chin. Smiling when I met his gaze, he whispered,
I'm not going anywhere.
I nodded rather than outright lie by agreeing. People always said that, but we both knew no one could promise such a thing. Aaron's phone vibrated in his pocket. Much to my frustration, he ignored it. You should get that.
Whoever it is can wait.
He pulled me closer. The cell vibrated again. It could be the station. I eased away. It's past midnight. Technically, we're both on call. He checked the screen, frowned, and hit redial.
Detective Burns.
I couldn't make out the caller's words, but Aaron's expression told me it wasn't good. He stood and walked toward the kitchen. Bryson returned to the front room and folded his arms. We'd lived with Aaron long enough to recognize the signs. Clipped responses, tight expression, stiff spine. Aaron had a new case. A homicide.
Text the address. Be there in 30.
He shoved the phone in his jeans pocket.
Tessa, they need both of us on this one.
Bryson hung his head.
It's the middle of the night, and she's pregnant.
I'm standing right here, and I'm not deaf or an invalid. I felt like death on a cracker, but I had 4 more weeks before my maternity leave kicked in. Besides, working beat the heck out of sitting up all night waiting to find out which one of my friends or family members had kicked the bucket.
Between the budget cuts and the hiring freeze, there isn't anyone else available.
Scratching the dark stubble on his jaw, Aaron glanced from me to Bryson.
I'll have a uniformed officer bring her home as soon as she's finished speaking to the victim's family.
Bryson walked to me and pressed his brow to mine. A slow but steady stream of magic passed from him to me.
Forgive me. It's been a stressful day.
Thank you. My energy level improved. I felt like I'd had 8 hours of sleep and 2 cups of coffee. I'll be back before you know it. Dressed in maternity khakis and a tent-like Orange County Police Department polo, I kissed the kids and Bryson goodnight and headed for the door. Aaron patted his back pocket for his wallet, front pocket for his phone, and double-checked his sidearm and badge. He furrowed his brow and turned for the bedroom. I knew his ritual well enough to know why he'd turned, and jangled his keys to get his attention.
Thanks, but don't think for a second you're driving.
I tossed the ring to him. I know. It's the age of equality, but the guys will never let you live down your wife chauffeuring you around.
Damn straight.
He walked me to the car and opened my door.
Age of equality or not, chivalry isn't dead.
Yeah. Let's get this over with so I can get home before breakfast. I fidgeted with the seatbelt until my belly poked out the space between the lap and shoulder restraints. We rode in a comfortable silence until my stomach growled. He laughed.
Hungry?
A little, but I don't want to eat until after I leave the death scene.
Good idea.
He didn't say it, but the twinkle in his eyes told me he was thinking about the number of times I'd hurled on the job in my first trimester. Is this a victim's advocate case, or should I keep my supernatural eyes and ears open? I glanced at the GPS display to see where we were headed. I recognized the street name. Definitely the bad side of town.
I'd rather you not use magic on my watch.
I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. I don't need to do anything special if the ghost comes to me, nor do I use magic to read objects. It just sort of happens. He must have picked up on the frustration in my voice because he winked and flashed me a grin.
Great. Then I'll take any and all help you can give. It's a possible DV.
I loathed domestic violence cases. Other than dead kids, there was nothing worse than working with someone suspected of murdering their spouse. Peachy. He turned onto a dirt road. 2 blocks up, red and blue lights flashing marked our destination.
Just to be safe, stay in the car until I send someone out to escort you to the family.
Okay. I leaned forward to get a better look at the area. Even in the alternating light, I could make out a few dilapidated houses and trailers. Thankfully, the one with the squad cars out front looked better cared for. Aaron pulled into the driveway and hit the brakes hard enough my seatbelt engaged.
Shit.
I followed his gaze to a Ford F-150 with monster-sized tires and a specialty license plate. My breath caught in my throat. The truck belonged to Tank. Chapter 7. I threw the door open and darn near strangled myself and my unborn child with the seatbelt. Fumbling with the release, I struggled to keep my emotions from running down my face. Aaron took my hand.
Tessa, wait, you can't go in there.
Like hell I can't. The buckle unlocked and I hit the ground running. A car door slammed behind me, but I kept moving. He'd have to tackle me to keep me out of the trailer. Given my delicate condition, I doubted he'd try.
Damn it, Tessa, will you wait a minute?
Aaron clamped a hand on my shoulder.
Tank's truck is at a crime scene.
Ignoring the wide-eyed stares from other officers, techs, and nosy neighbors, I spun to face him. And he leaned close.
It's against department policy to work a case involving family.
I know that. Not that I intended to let the rules stop me from finding out what the heck had happened. We're babysitting his son. I have to know if he's... Aaron put his face in my line of vision.
Listen to me. We don't know whose house this is.
You're right. We don't. I've never been here before. Grandma mentioned something about them moving a month or so earlier, but it's not like I visited Lulu on a regular basis. Even when I babysat, Tank always brought TJ to me.
We go in, we get a look around, and we get out. I'll notify the chief of our conflict of interest once we know if or how Tank's involved.
Okay. I glanced from him to the front door. Someone had left it wide open. Light and voices spilled out. Under different circumstances, I would have thought there was a party going on. I followed Aaron into the crowded trailer. The place stunk to high heaven, but I couldn't place the odor. Not old booze or cigarettes, not the coppery sweet scent of blood, not urine or feces. None of the typical death scene aromas fit the bill, but whatever it was, it made my stomach roil. Aaron nodded to his partner, Detective Richard Samuels, a good man on the inside, and a just the facts ma'am man on the outside. Samuels frowned when he noticed me.
Sorry to drag you out this late, Lamar.
It's my job. The second I opened my mouth, the foulness in the air hit the back of my throat. I hadn't puked in months, but I had a feeling I was about to end my vomit-free streak. Aaron handed me a clean hanky.
Use this to block the smell. It'll help.
Nodding, I pressed it to my face. The familiar sense of home, laundry detergent, and cedar wood from the dresser calmed my gut. However, it did nothing for my nerves. I didn't have the patience to stand around and make small talk. I needed to know what the hell had happened.
Body's in the back.
Samuels motioned down the hall.
Where is the family? Tessa needs to do her thing and get home.
He glanced around the room, likely searching for personal items that would confirm our fears.
Gone. One of the first responders said the guy vanished while they were securing the scene.
Samuels smirked. Guy? Maybe it's not Tank in there. Is it Lulu? Before I could sort out my thoughts, Samuels and Aaron headed down the hall. I followed. Aaron turned to me.
Stay here. I'll be right back.
I have to see. Samuels lowered his voice.
Lamar, there are things you can't unsee. This one tops my list.
Several others nodded in agreement, and one tech shuddered. Rather than agreeing, I nodded. A horde of stampeding elephants couldn't keep me away from the body. I'd known the day would end in grief since the moment I'd opened my eyes. I had to know who'd died. The men turned and walked down the hall. I counted to 10 and followed. The lack of family photos or personal items bugged me. I peeked into a small bedroom and noted a twin-sized bed and dresser. No toys or books or anything that told me who the room belonged to. Techs filled a second bedroom. Some dusted for prints while others collected fiber samples from the carpet and blankets. Once again, I found no personal effects. I closed my eyes and focused on the trailer itself. Funny thing about homes, they have an energy all their own. It's like the walls absorb bits and pieces of the family that lives there. I'd long suspected the phenomenon led to the phrase, "It feels like home." The trailer had no energy. None. Nada. Zipperoonie. How was that possible? Heart racing, I made my way farther down the hall. People came and went from a larger room. It was too small to be a real master, but larger than the first two. I couldn't get a good look at the bed or the body lying on it. An investigator shoved a navy blue comforter into an evidence bag, while another placed a pillow into a plastic container. Both men stepped away, and then I saw what appeared to be a slab of beef. Pink muscles and white tendons glistened in the too bright light. I couldn't make sense of it. That is, until I glanced further down at the victim's foot. Oh, my God. I wanted to close my eyes, to turn away, to leave, but I couldn't move. The victim's skin was missing. All of it. My brain refused to process the visual info, so much so I couldn't make sense of the scene, let alone understand the feeling something was off with the entire situation. Aaron stepped in front of me, spun me around, and all but shoved me into the hall. Normally, I would have argued, but I'd never been so grateful to be manhandled in my life.
What are you doing back here?
The edge in Aaron's voice didn't match the lost look in his eyes. As a homicide detective, he'd seen the worst of the worst. But Samuels was right. This case topped them all. Was that Tank? He sighed.
No. The Vic is a woman. It'll take time to identify her.
How could someone do that? I couldn't get the mental image out of my brain. Something was wrong, besides the obvious. Something about the body didn't make sense, but I couldn't hold on to a thought long enough to sort it out. Lulu?
No telling.
He glanced around at the others, took my hand, and didn't stop walking until we'd reached his car.
Something strange is going on.
You think? I rubbed my forehead. The oddity I couldn't put my finger on came to me like a bolt of lightning. Holy crap! There was no blood!
Perps have been known to move bodies, especially if they want to stage them.
Aaron sighed.
But that's not what...
That didn't look staged. The fact that the body in the bed most likely belonged to Lulu hit me like a bullet between the eyes. Who called it in? It had to be Tank. We have to find him. Oh no, TJ. He's lost his mama.
We don't know that yet.
He lowered his voice, likely hoping I'd do the same. That's Tank's truck outside. Who else could it be in that bed? Listen to me. He took me by the shoulders.
This is going to sound nuts. My dream. It smelled like Tessa. Thank God.
Tank's voice drew more than my attention. He staggered from the crowd of onlookers. The officers in the front yard turned and stared. I choked out a sob and hurried to him. I saw your truck and thought... Tank wasn't a hugger, but he broke his rule and held me so tight I thought my amniotic sac would burst like a water balloon. Rather than diving into the hard topic right away, I hedged. When did y'all move in here? I didn't see any of your stuff inside.
Last week.
Lowering his voice, he spoke without looking me in the eye.
Landlord at the last place threw our stuff out.
Property owners can't just toss your personal belongings. I swallowed hard. They had been evicted. Did you lose your job? Tank shook his head.
Lulu was in charge of the money. She spent darned near every cent I made at a fortune teller in Orlando.
Ah, yes, her mentor. I'm sorry, Tank. Let me know if you and TJ need anything.
Thanks.
He hugged me again.
Were you the one who called 911?
Aaron asked. Tank took a step back, glanced toward the trailer, and dipped his chin.
Yes.
Why'd you take off? The officer said you ran while they were securing the scene. Not for 1 second did I think he'd killed his wife, but leaving made him seem guilty. Where did you go?
I had to clear my head.
He shoved his hands in his pockets.
Lulu, she's...
I'd blown it. The man's wife had been horrifically murdered. Rather than comforting him, I'd assaulted him with questions. I know, and I am so sorry. What happened in there? Aaron held his hand up.
Don't say another word until you sit down with someone else to give your statement.
Tank nodded, but I was having no part of it. Since I'm no longer here on official police business, he can tell me whatever he wants. I pointed at my husband. You, on the other hand, have a definite conflict of interest and a badge to think about. You need to walk away.
Tessa, you could be subpoenaed to testify. Wait, you don't think I did this?
Tank went ramrod straight.
No, but it's not my call.
Aaron turned the full weight of his stare on me.
Darling, we're both treading on thin ice here.
I ignored him, grabbed Tank's arm and pulled him to the other side of the car. Tell me what happened. Muttering something under his breath, Aaron dialed his cell phone. Lucky for him, the distance I'd put between us swallowed his words. Tank hunched his shoulders and tucked his chin, as if trying to make his 6'4" frame smaller.
I came home. We argued, had make-up sex, and went to sleep.
Nodding, I motioned for him to continue.
I woke up to take a piss, and she was...
His voice cracked.
Skinned. Like a deer.
Mental images of the body inside the trailer stole my breath. I couldn't imagine that happening to one of my men, let alone waking up beside the body. You didn't hear anything? He shook his head without meeting my gaze. How much did you have to drink? He wiggled his fingers as if adding up the total.
Including the whiskey after I called 911?
Oh, Tank. I closed my eyes and counted to 14. Aaron was right. The deeper I dug, the more it felt like doing a triple axel on a half-frozen pond filled with gators. Listen, you have to tell the police exactly what happened. Don't lie. Don't guess. Don't embellish. Tell them what you know and stick to it. Got it?" He nodded, but still hadn't looked at me. In fact, his body language reminded me of TJ's the time I'd caught him polishing off an entire pie. Covered in blueberry filling, the boy had made his entire confession and heartfelt plea for forgiveness without once taking his attention off his sneakers. Lifting my chin, I did my best Grandma imitation. "What aren't you telling me?" He glanced up for a split second and shuddered.
"You're gonna think I'm nuts."
That was the second time someone had uttered those words in the last 5 minutes. "Try me." Tank swallowed hard.
"I swear on a stack of Bibles, a monster left the room with Lulu's skin."
Chapter 8. Questions buzzed around my head like flies on a rotten watermelon. Exactly how much did you have to drink? Are you on drugs? What kind of monster? What do you mean it took her skin? Was it in a big pile, or was it hanging over its arm like an overcoat? Thankfully, Detective Samuels joined us before I managed to utter a word. Stiff spine, tense jaw, narrowed eyes. The man looked as if he'd marched into a street fight instead of a conversation.
"Would one of you mind telling me what the hell is going on?"
I deferred to Aaron with the sweetest smile I could muster under the current circumstances. My hubby hitched a shoulder.
"I asked the chief to take me off the case. I got that much."
Samuel's face turned ruby red. If someone didn't de-escalate the situation, I feared he'd have a stroke.
"Tessa and I are related to the Vic. How could you possibly identify—"
The detective's attention shifted to Tank. He cocked his head for half a heartbeat before the light came on behind his eyes.
"I remember you from the wedding. You live here?"
Shoulders slumped, Tank nodded.
"I called the police."
Samuel's expression changed from curious to cop face.
"The officers tell me you left the scene."
I stepped forward. No one told him he couldn't.
"Tessa?"
Aaron's voice held an edge of warning. "Don't Tessa me. It's true." I focused on Samuel's. Tank didn't do anything wrong. Between waking up next to his dead wife and the stench in there, he needed some air, but he's ready to give his statement now. Tank looked anything but ready to give his statement. In fact, he looked like he might run away, throw up, or both. Samuels motioned to a uniformed officer.
"This is the witness. Escort him to Helms."
The younger man widened his eyes.
"You're not taking his statement? I thought you were on the case." "Would I ask you to take him to another detective if I were on the damned case?" "I'm related to the victim by marriage. Chief put Helms and Jankowski on the case."
Aaron stared until the officer took Tank into the trailer. Samuels studied us for a long moment.
"Either of you have an idea what the unholy hell happened in there?"
Aaron glanced away so quickly, I thought he might have sprained his eyeballs. He knew something his partner and I didn't.
"Not a clue, but it's time I get Tessa home." "Cut the shit, Burns."
Well, I wouldn't have used those words. Samuels had said what I was thinking. "You've been acting strange since you walked into the trailer. What's going on?"
"Nothing, other than I'd rather not have my pregnant wife at a death scene, let alone one as gruesome as this."
He motioned in the general direction of my belly.
"It can't be good for the baby." "I agree. This is no place for you, Tessa."
Folding his arms, Samuels locked gazes with Aaron.
"But I'm calling bullshit. We've been partners too long to start lying to each other now. You know, or strongly suspect, something."
Aaron glanced over the yard.
"Nothing that will stand up in court. Let me guess. It has something to do with magic?"
Samuels smirked.
"Yes and no."
He sighed and lowered his voice.
I saw the murder in a dream.
I took a step back to steady myself. I'd seen and heard a lot of crazy things since rising from the dead, but he'd shocked me. After the whole soul-sharing incident, we knew Aaron had inherited the ability to boost mine and Bryson's magic, but we didn't know he had any special powers of his own. Samuels remained quiet for a long moment, seeming to digest the new information. Did you see who killed Lulu? I wasn't sure I wanted an answer. Unless he could ID a living, breathing person, nothing he said would clear Tank. I mean, it's not like we could haul a skin-stealing monster into a court of law.
Not a who, more like a what.
He shuddered, as if the memory had cost him.
The thing that killed her, looked like a skinless corpse.
The blood drained from Samuel's face.
Animated dead. Are we dealing with some sort of zombie? I wish I knew.
Aaron turned to me as if expecting an answer. I've never heard of anything like this. The closest I'd come was a skinwalker, but despite the name, he didn't do anything with his actual skin. He'd used dark magic to either shapeshift to look like someone else, or to inhabit the bodies of other people. Aaron pressed his lips into a line and nodded once. Bryson may have some ideas. I wished I could reassure him, but the more I thought about it, the more the entire situation freaked me out. It might have been selfish, but all I could think about was the skinless bad guy realizing Aaron had witnessed the killing. Samuels ran his hand through his bristlebrush hair.
Do we need to stake the Vic?
No, I said, quicker and louder than I'd intended. She's not going to rise as a vampire or zombie or whatever. Is she? It might have been a sin to speak ill of the dead, but Lulu had been a nightmare when she was alive. I refused to imagine what she would be like as one of the undead, if there was such a thing.
We should go speak to Bryson.
Aaron took my hand. But, Tank, we can't just leave him here.
Go get some rest.
Samuels nodded to the car.
I'll give him a ride to your place once he's finished giving his statement.
They won't arrest him tonight, will they? I'd been on quite a few murder cases. I should have known the answer. But truth be told, I'd never paid attention to the arresting part of things. I focused on helping the surviving family members or speaking to the ghosts of the dearly departed.
It's doubtful, but possible.
The older detective scrunched his face while scratching his forehead.
He smells like a brewery, and he left the scene.
I opened my mouth to protest. Samuels raised his hands and walked backward toward the trailer.
I know. I'll see what I can do, but it'd be a hell of a lot easier if I was still on the case.
Aaron slung his arm around my shoulders and guided me to the car.
I hope I didn't make a mistake telling him about the dream.
Had he mentioned it to any other non-magic user, I would have worried. But Samuels was a believer. He'd witnessed ghosts punching me in the nose, dragging me through a death scene, and feeding me information. Heck, he'd all but seen me shift into the Firebird. Other than making an art form of telling bird jokes, the man hadn't said a word. He won't tell anyone. I pressed closer to him and drew a deep breath. Normally, his scent alone calmed my nerves, but not tonight. Tonight, he smelled like roadkill. You stink. Please tell me my hair doesn't smell like that god-awful trailer.
We should shower when we get home.
His words came out matter-of-fact, a far cry from his usual teasing, eyebrow-wiggling self. I understood. For once, the last thing on my mind was sex. Instead, I focused on the case, specifically the odor. It had struck me as familiar when I'd first walked through the front door, but the thought of my cousin lying dead in the next room kept me distracted. Now that I'd come down from the adrenaline spike, it hit me. God in heaven! You smelled like that when we couldn't wake you. Aaron nodded. A nod? He knew and wasn't freaking out? What aren't you telling me? Aaron tensed but remained quiet until he'd helped me into the car, slid into the driver's seat, and put some distance between us and the flashing lights.
That thing Bryson said. Dreamwalking. What do you know about it?
Absolutely nothing. But Bryson sure seemed to know what was going on. Middle of the night or not, we're having a family meeting. I pulled my phone from my purse and called home. Chapter 9. The good Lord doesn't give you more than you can handle. I mentally repeated Grandma's go-to phrase over and over, but it didn't help. In fact, I strongly suspected God had better things to do than to throw trials and tribulations at unsuspecting folks. Not to say he didn't care. In my experience, when I found myself buried under a big steaming pile of manure, God would throw me a shovel and tell me to dig. That night, I needed a bulldozer. I sat on my hands and bit the inside of my cheek to keep from interrupting Aaron while he told Bryson about the dream and the murder and the monster. It killed me to wait, but we'd get nowhere if I blurted out questions like a hyperactive 3-year-old.
Have you had this sort of dream before?
Bryson flipped through the pages of Charlie's spellbook.
About a homicide? No.
Aaron frowned at his hands.
But my dreams have been more vivid lately.
Between his tone and the faint blush on his cheeks, I had a good idea of the content of his dreams. We didn't have time, and I didn't have the energy to tease him about it. Instead, I forced my mind out of the gutter and focused on the matter at hand. Anything about dreamwalkers in Charlie's book?
No.
Bryson sat back and dragged his hand down his face.
And you two are sure the odor at the crime scene is the same?
Absolutely sure. It was very distinct. I brought a clump of my hair to my nose and sniffed. It smelled like shampoo. I scooted myself to the edge of the sofa, or tried to. Between my belly and the soft cushions, I fought a losing battle. Dang it, I give up. Aaron, come here a sec. He stood and offered me his hand.
Need some help?
No. Lean down here and let me smell your hair. He raised a brow, but didn't argue. I sniffed him. Though the stench had faded since we'd left the murder scene, enough of it lingered that my stomach turned. Yep, still there. We were in the trailer the same amount of time, but I don't smell it on me. This caught Bryson's attention. He stood, scented the two of us, and furrowed his brow.
She's right.
Tank said something about Lulu smelling awful, too. I tapped my lips. It must have something to do with the dream, but how's that possible?
I don't know.
Bryson glanced at the clock.
I'll make some calls in the morning. Let's try to get a couple hours of sleep before the kids wake up.
Kids. I'd all but forgotten TJ was sleeping over. Call me a coward, but I didn't want to be the person who told him his mother had died. I turned to Aaron. Shouldn't Samuels have dropped Tank off by now?
Yeah. I'll find out what's going on.
He pulled his phone from his pocket, dialed, and waited.
Samuels isn't picking up.
Bryson yawned.
They're probably on the road.
Aaron drummed his fingers on his cell.
You two go to bed. I'll wait up for him.
I need a few minutes alone. Though exhausted, I highly doubted I could sleep. My brain didn't come with a power button. Plus, I wanted a little while to sit and think through the events of the previous 24 hours. Lulu wasn't my favorite person, but she was family. Her death would hurt people I loved, and the way she'd died would haunt me for the rest of my life.
Damn,
Aaron sat beside me.
we barely acknowledged the fact you lost your cousin tonight.
The tenderness in his voice undid me. My throat tightened and my vision blurred. We didn't get along. Bryson moved to my other side.
But you cared about her, and you loved Tank and TJ.
What are we going to tell him? What about Grandma and Dottie? They can't find out the details. It's too awful. My voice cracked.
These aren't our decisions to make. It's best that we follow Tank's lead.
As always, Bryson supplied the voice of reason in my emotional meltdown. You're right. I wiped my eyes and sat straighter. Between the tears and the snot, I needed a tissue. Aaron handed me the box from the end table.
Sweetheart, let's take a shower. The hot water will help relax you.
Hiccuping my words, I said, "Okay. Need to wash off the crime scene cooties." His phone chirped.
Hey, Samuels, do you have an ETA on Tank's arrival? We're heading for bed.
Aaron's wide-eyed, open-mouthed expression sent my heart into palpitations and my mind racing. Had the monster returned? Did Tank run off again? Did Lulu rise from the dead? I pressed my hand to my chest and mouthed, "What is it?" He held up a finger.
It's premature, no?
Taking my free hand, Bryson whispered,
Breathe. Yeah, okay. I'll tell the family.
Aaron disconnected the call. I wanted to holler, but I didn't dare wake the kids. "Tell us what?"
They arrested Tank.
He stood and paced a few strides, then turned back.
He didn't take your advice when the officers questioned him.
Blood roared behind my eardrums. Oh no.
He mentioned seeing a monster carrying Lulu's skin.
Aaron sighed.
They're placing him on an involuntary hold.
He's in the psych ward? I lost the battle to keep my voice down. I need to get down there. I can talk some sense into him. Bryson squeezed my hand.
Tessa, it's 5 a.m.
And? Aaron knelt in front of me.
And he's being charged with murder. He won't be allowed visitors.
I can talk to the psychiatrist. Malcolm Alexander works some nights. If he's on call... High, shrill, and filled with urgency, TJ's scream ended the conversation better than a tornado siren ended a walk in the rain. The boy bolted into the living room with Jolene on his heels. Pale-faced and eyes as big as silver-dollar pancakes, Jojo glanced between us. Bryson shot to his feet.
What's wrong?
Aaron didn't wait for an answer. He headed for the back of the house, likely expecting to find an intruder. The girl chewed her lower lip. "I saw someone in the bedroom."
Stay here.
Bryson followed Aaron. She met my gaze, and I knew what she'd say before she opened her mouth. "A ghost?" TJ wailed again. This time he sounded more like a basset hound than an air horn. No, this can't be happening. I needed to call the men back into the room. I needed to comfort the kids. Heck, I needed to corral the spirit before she did something that would put TJ in therapy for the rest of his life. But the wiring between my brain and my mouth short-circuited. Lulu Rose's skinless spirit hovered beside her crying son. Chapter 10. "This is all your fault," Lulu launched herself at me. On an intellectual level, I doubted her spirit had the strength to harm me, but my fight-or-flight instincts disagreed. I tried to stand, but it was no use. She was quick and pissed and out for blood. Thankfully, her ghostly hands passed through my neck. That, however, did nothing to deter her. She tried to claw and scratch my eyes out. The chilly, yet sticky sensation reminded me of walking through spider webs. It gave me the willies more than the darned ghost. "Stop it!" I batted at her icy fingers. "Bryson!" TJ fell silent during the otherworldly catfight, or so I thought. In reality, he'd taken a break to gather his strength. The boy opened his mouth, threw his head back, and screamed loud enough for people 3 counties over to hear him. Hands covering her ears, Jolene shouted, "Hush!" The commotion distracted Lulu's spirit long enough for me to roll my pregnant body away from her and scramble to my feet. Unfortunately, the child didn't hold her attention long. This time she came at me, fists swinging. "You did this to me!" "Calm down." I dodged her attack. "We need to talk." "Screw you!" My husbands ran back into the room like a couple of Keystone Cops. That is, if Keystone Cops were hunky and anxious and ready to kick some serious butt. They took in the scene. One kid screaming, the other yelling for him to stop, and me fighting off an unseen foe.
"Tessa?"
Bryson shifted his weight from one foot to the other as if trying to decide which way to go. Very upset spirit. I had much more to say on the matter, but I didn't dare in front of TJ. Aaron gaped like a fish hooked up to an oxygen tank.
"Holy shit! How do we stop her?"
"You can see her?" I bobbed when I should have weaved, and Lulu's ghostly hand slipped through my belly. Quinn reacted fast and furious. It felt as if he stretched to his full height inside me. Wombs were round. Babies were meant to curl up inside their mothers. That's why they called the fetal position the fetal position. His reaction to the spectral hand left me seeing stars. Cradling my unborn son, I went to my knees. "Stop! Please, stop!" Lulu didn't stop. She'd found my weakness and exploited it. An ice-cold fist shot through my lower back, stealing my breath. The baby jolted again. Only this time he fought harder and longer than the first. A scream tore from my throat before I could stop it. Jolene shouted orders, TJ wailed, and I braced myself for another attack. Bryson and Aaron moved close, but only one of them could see what was happening, and he wasn't the one with the power to send her away. "You're going to pay," Lulu's voice rang in my ears. "A life for a life." The warmth of my mate's hands helped to ease the pain, but they did nothing to quell my fear. I tried to speak, to tell Bryson to do the spell, to beg Lulu Rose to stop, but I choked on my own spit. Or maybe it was the air. Either way, I couldn't seem to get the words out. Bryson and Aaron chanted a spell I recognized from our previous dealings with spirits. However, it didn't seem to weaken Lulu. She continued her tirade at the same ear-piercing volume. My only saving grace was the men had formed human shields around me, making it impossible for her to strike out at our child again. And then the noise stopped. Confused, and more than a little terrified, I lifted my head. Jolene stood in the center of the living room with her arm outstretched toward the far wall. Eyes narrowed and mouth clenched tight, she took several halting steps.
"Not sure how long she can hold her."
Aaron nodded toward the spirit. Hold her? I turned and stared, not believing my eyes. Lulu Rose reminded me of a butterfly pinned inside a display case, but far more gruesome. On second thought, she looked more like a ball of bacon in a dress than a butterfly. Glancing at Bryson, I said, "Someone has to move. You have to go." His voice joined mine.
You will go in the dark. You will hide in the day. I send you away back to where you were. Through paths not walked, with eyes not seeing. I send you away. This is said. This will be.
Our magic merged as we repeated the spell 2 more times. Lulu Rose rolled her lidless eyes. "It ain't working." "Mama?" TJ moved from behind Jolene. The living adults in the room stared at the boy. It seemed none of us had any idea how to handle the situation. "You can see her too?" It occurred to me I'd asked a really stupid question. Of course TJ could see her. What else would have caused him to scream bloody murder earlier? I turned to Bryson in hopes he'd have an explanation, and caught him staring at the spirit too. "Wait, everyone can see her?" Without taking his eyes off Lulu, he whispered,
I can now.
"What's wrong with her?" TJ's voice came out in a squeak. "It's me, baby. Come closer so I can get a look at you," Lulu cooed. A puddle formed around TJ's bare feet. The poor kid didn't seem to notice as he shook his head and backed away. Keeping the spirit pinned in place, Jolene said, "That's not your mama." "Like hell I'm not." The spirit's face turned a shade of red that reminded me of fresh venison. Jojo twisted her hand, and Lulu's mouth froze in place. TJ whimpered, "It sounds like her." Jojo shook her head. "It's a monster playing a dirty trick on you." Jolene had lied. Bryson drew a deep breath and met my gaze. His heartbroken expression told me he knew the score. Jolene had to know the truth, but she'd tried to spare TJ. Aaron cleared his throat.
We need to do something, quick.
He was right. Jojo couldn't hold the spirit back much longer. Her control slipped, so much so Lulu could move her hands. "I have an idea, but I need to—" I met Aaron's gaze and prayed he'd get the hint. "I need salt. Could you and TJ run to Grandma's and get some?" He raised a brow.
We're out.
Bryson all but growled the words,
Go.
Aaron stood, scooped the child into his arms, and hurried out the door. That he hadn't as much as batted a lash at TJ's wet pants made me love him a little more. The poor kid's hell had only just begun. The last thing he needed was a side of shame to go with his grief-seasoned shit sandwich. "Mommy, hurry!" Jojo's outstretched arm shook. I rushed to mine and Bryson's office and pulled down an old cobalt blue bottle, a baggie of grave dirt, and a large container of holy water-infused salt. Seeming to read my mind, Bryson took the blessed salt and formed a circle beneath Lulu. I managed to get half a cup or so of the grave dirt into the bottle instead of the floor. It'd have to do. Turning to him, I offered a weak smile. "Ready?"
We're not taking any chances. Give that to me.
For once, I agreed. I handed him the bottle and focused on the cold ball of magic deep inside me. Unlike the primal heat of the Firebird, this power came from another source, something darker and scarier that allowed me to commune with the dead. I nodded for him to step into the circle. Bryson knelt and touched the salt line to form an impassable barrier. I couldn't see the magic, but I sure as heck felt it roar to life. "Black Crow, I beseech you, come now and bind this restless soul. Place her in the vessel and show her peace. I beseech you, come." Bryson's voice rose.
Don't put her in the bottle, Tessa. Send her away.
No, we need answers. I repeated the incantation.
It's too dangerous.
Send her away, Mommy! Tears streamed down the girl's face. She might have put on a brave front for TJ, but Lulu had scared her. I couldn't do it. Not if it meant Tank could go to jail for a murder he hadn't committed. Not if it meant TJ would grow up without either parent. Not if it meant whoever or whatever was out there could do this to another family. I had to keep her on this side of the veil, for the time being, anyway. I repeated the incantation for the third time. Bryson scowled and raised the bottle to just below Lulu's feet. It seemed like an eternity passed before anything happened. A gentle breeze blew through the room and swirled around the spirit. Bit by bit, it picked up speed until wind and the ghost became one inside a miniature tornado at the top of the bottle. A heartbeat later, both disappeared inside the dark blue glass. Bryson clamped his hand over the opening.
Get a piece of aluminum foil and a rubber band.
I turned quicker than I'd intended and wobbled when the room kept on spinning without me. Jojo rushed to my side and guided me to the couch. Are you okay? I think so. Just tired. I forced a smile. The foil is in the pantry, rubber bands in the junk drawer. The girl darted for the kitchen. Still holding his hand over the bottle, Bryson sat beside me and offered his bare arm. The skin-to-skin contact helped, but I feared nothing short of 8 hours of sleep would cure my sudden fatigue. The baby isn't hurt. I can sense his energy. He nodded once and frowned.
No more magic until he's born.
I did not have the energy for a lecture, or to argue for that matter, but I couldn't let it go. It wasn't the magic. It was her. She tried to hurt him to hurt me.
I saw her.
He shuddered.
I thought we'd lose.
I have this stuff. Jojo glanced between us. The conversation ended, but I knew what he was about to say. I'd thought the same. Our unborn baby was in danger. How can we protect our children when we have no idea what we're protecting them from? Bryson secured the foil over the top of the bottle, stood, and walked into the office. When he returned, he glanced between Jolene and me.
Neither of you are to open it.
Part of me wanted to argue, the pig-headed part. The saner half sighed in relief. Agreed. Lower lip quivering, Jojo nodded. He drew her into an embrace.
It's over now. I'm proud of you. You kept calm when us grown-ups didn't.
I stroked her hair. Thank you for what you said to TJ. He's too young to understand the truth. She furrowed her brow. It wasn't a whole lie. That got my attention. What do you mean? His mama's in there, but she's not alone. She had a monster with her. That's why everyone could see her. I focused on the residual energy in the room. Sure enough, a dark, oily residue hung in the air. How had I missed it? Better question, what would have happened if Jojo hadn't stepped in? So much for giving her a normal life.
This has been part 1 of the Spirit Walker, Tessa Lamar novels, Book 4. Written by Kathryn M. Hearst. Narrated by Holly Adams. If you enjoyed this audiobook, please subscribe to Kathryn's channel where you can find part 2 of the Spirit Walker, along with more of Kathryn's paranormal and contemporary romance novels.